Friends, hi, namaskar, and a very warm welcome. Our journey is still stuck in the 1940s. Actually, as I told you earlier, 1940s is a very happening decade, and apart from Second World War, India's independence, many other events have happened, particularly in Asia. Actually, what has happened is in the 1940s, after the Second World War, the European powers who were the colonial powers in many of the Asian countries had become weakened, and there was a lot of cry from these countries for independence. Keeping this background in mind, let us see what is happening in the larger countries of Asia. First, we quickly go to Indonesia. Indonesia is the fourth most populated country in the world, and its large population is scattered over various islands. The main islands, Java and Sumatra, are fairly large ones. Indonesia, since the 19th century, is being ruled by the Dutch. This was up to 1942, when the Japanese attacked and defeated the Dutch army, and the entire army surrendered to the Japanese. During the years of Japanese occupation, the Indonesian nationalist movement for independence, which started in the early 1900s under the leadership of Sukarno and Muhammad Hatta, continued. In 1945 August, when Japan surrendered at the end of the Second World War, there was no Dutch representative in Indonesia to accept the surrender, and only allied forces there was a contingent of the British forces. Taking this opportunity, Sukarno and Muhammad Hatta declared independence for Indonesia. The large population of Indonesians supported this move, and after 3-4 months, in late 1945, a government was formed by Sukarno in Jakarta, the capital. But the Dutch were not willing to let go of their colony so easily, and they requested the British to hold fort till the time the Dutch could send an army contingent in Indonesia. The British had several conflicts with the Indonesian nationalists, and the results were inconclusive. By December 1946, Dutch sent a huge contingent of 55,000 soldiers to Indonesia, and the British left the island immediately as soon as the Dutch arrived. Thereafter, there were several bloody conflicts between the nationalists and the Dutch. Somehow the Dutch were able to control few of the large towns, but as I told you earlier, Indonesia comprising of very large number of islands, it was very difficult for the Dutch army to control entire Indonesia. In the rural areas where most of the population resided, there was major support for the nationalists, and the conflicts went on. Ultimately, the United States intervened, and by 1949 middle, threatened Dutch with the withdrawal of the Marshall Aid Plan for rebuilding of the Dutch country. The Dutch, who were actually heavily dependent on the Marshall Aid to rebuild their country after the devastations of the Second World War, ultimately yielded, and they recognized independent Indonesia in 1949 December. Thus was born independent Indonesia. Today, Indonesia, with a population of 28 crores, is a very large economy, well developed economy in Asia, and is a very large market. Moving on from Indonesia, we come to China, the most populated large country of Asia. I have been mentioning about China off and on in the earlier episodes, and what we know is that China is a republic since 1912 under the Kuomintang party, and the president is Chiang Kai-shek. But the rule of the Kuomintang party is not absolute. The Chinese Communist Party under Mao Zedong is established in China in 1921, and from 1927 onwards, the Communists and the Kuomintangs are engaged in a fierce struggle to control the country. In 1937, a ceasefire was announced when Japan attacked China, and both the sides jointly resisted the Japanese attack. During the Second World War years, China was practically controlled in three parts by the three parties. Communists controlled a smaller part of China, while the nationalists Kuomintangs had a larger section which they controlled. The Japanese occupation army controlled entire North China, including the mineral-rich Manchurian province. When the Second World War ended, there was a race between the Communists and Kuomintangs to take control of the area which was earlier controlled by the Japanese. The Communists apparently won the race, and they were able to take control of the major portion of North China, including the Manchurian province. At that point of time, the United States is supporting the nationalist Kuomintangs, and Harry Truman, the US president, sent his emissary George Marshall to negotiate a treaty between the two warring sides. It seemed that George Marshall, after prolonged negotiation, was successful in arranging for a treaty, but somehow, unfortunately, before the treaty could be signed, the Communists attacked the Kuomintang strongholds in great strength, and the treaty collapsed. After the collapse of the treaty, the struggle between the two raged on, and the nationalists, with the US aid, took control of several large cities which were earlier under the control of the Chinese Communists. But in the rural area, just like in Indonesia, the peasantry were solidly behind the Communists, and the Communists held on. The conflicts continued, and by 1947-48, the tide turned in favor of the Communists. By the middle of 1948, People's Republic of North China was established, and shortly afterwards, the United States washed their hands off the Chinese affairs. And by 1949 January, Chiang Kai-shek, seeing the writing on the wall, resigned as president of the Nationalist Republic. But his successor continued the struggle. Slowly and steadily, the Chinese started pushing the nationalist Kuomintangs out of mainland China, and it took them 9 months to do that. By end September, the remaining nationalist Republicans took refuge in the island of Taiwan, and the People's Republic of China was established on 1st of October 1949. With this, the 2-decade-long struggle for control of China ended, with the Communists emerging victorious under the leadership of Mao Zedong, and he became the first chairman or president of the People's Republic of China. Within days, the Soviet Union and the entire communist bloc recognized the newly formed People's Republic, and as the decade drew to an end, the communists prepared to close their borders to the Western world. As the decade draws to an end, I shall also be closing the program, and I will be leaving you with a what if question. What if the nationalists won the conflict in 1949? What would have been the position of China? Would they be so important in the world economy as they are today? Please ponder on this. See you next time. Till then, bye, namaste, and thanks.